In this video, we're going to talk about the rules of thirds, the golden ratios, and how it applies to aquascaping, and how to use these rules to become a good aquascaper. I'm also going to share with you a secret of taking and manipulating these rules to become an extraordinary aquascaper. Check it out. Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this video, as requested, we're going to talk about the rules of thirds, the golden ratio, and how it applies to aquascaping. First of all, the rule of thirds and the golden ratio are two separate sets of rule sets created for photography and filmmaking to give your subject more focus. And although there's an actual argument of which one is better, I think both actually works well, and you're going to start with one, sooner or later kind of gravitate towards the other. That be learning the rules of thirds first, and then you're kind of going to gravitate towards the golden ratio. Now, the rule of thirds is going to be way easier to learn than the golden ratio, because the golden ratio is actually based off a mathematical equation. Yeah, I know, ew, math. And this is aquariums. Who in the heck wants to do math, right? So let's start simply with the rule of thirds. Take the screen here that you're watching me on, and let's separate them into thirds. And the rule is simply this: you put your subject down one of the lines of the grids of the thirds, or put it in the points where they meet. Right now, I'm centering myself on the left third line. I'm also centering my eye line here on the top third line. Now, the reason for this is kind of psychological. It just actually drives the eyes to your subject. Leaving this area here bare actually makes your eyes just look over here while I'm talking. That really is the essence of how the rules of third works. Now, when you get into photography or filming, there's a lot more to it, but really this is all you really need to learn about it when you apply it to aquascaping. So now let's talk about the golden ratio. This one is a little bit hard to explain. Now, the best way to explain it is explain it with mathematics and why it's the golden ratio. So a very, very long time ago, a mathematician created the golden ratio, that being 1.618, give or take. So he thought by splitting the canvas with this ratio in certain ways that when you place your target or your focus, that it'll be more natural, more pleasing aesthetic to the eye. So this is how it works. From this end of the canvas to this end of the canvas, we'll call it A. And somewhere in the middle, we'll put right here a point. And the longer distance here is B. The shorter distance we'll call C. Now the mathematical equation goes like this: B divided by C equals A divided by B. And if the result lands somewhere around 1.618, that's the golden ratio. Now, using this ratio, we'll go ahead and split up the screen like this. Remember B and C? From this ratio, we'll create what's called the golden rectangles. The reason why it's called the golden rectangles is if you take out the smaller portion, C in this case, you can again apply the ratio and get another golden rectangle. And again and again. And then from these rectangles, you can actually draw a spiral. And in that area of the little swirl is where you're going to place the focus of your subject. And from this, you create what's called the phi grid. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. That is the explanation down to the basics of what the rules of thirds is and the golden ratio. So when you look at your fish tank, that fish tank is your canvas. Using the rules of thirds, we divide the tank up like this. So when you're building your aquascape, you want to line up the focuses with one of these lines or where it intersects. And also with the golden ratio, you could do the same exact thing. And this is how you use these rules to create an aquascape. Doing so creates a natural flow to the focal point of your aquascape. At least that's what they say it's supposed to do. Earlier in this video, I said we're going to manipulate these rules and take us from being a good aquascaper to an extraordinary aquascaper. Here's how. I'm going to give you two things that you're going to look out for. First of all, learn the rule of thirds, get used to them, and apply them in your daily life. I mean, it actually works pretty much everywhere you look when there's some kind of canvas or some kind of screen. The more you use it, the more intuitive you're going to become to knowing that that's what you're doing. You're going to be using. Now, when I'm doing filming or I'm doing aquascaping, it just comes naturally. It's just like, I know it goes here, I know it goes there. That is the rule of thirds. Now, after a while, you're going to start adjusting those rules of thirds, and you're going to find that you're probably going to gravitate towards the golden ratio rules. And that's okay. It's natural. It's going to happen. But one of the things that you have to remember is that the rules are there. The rules are meant to be broken. One of my favorite advice about giving someone is to Learn the rules first before you decide to break them. Because if you know the rules, at least you'll know how to break them. Does that make any sense, or that's kind of Zen backward logic? And that's what I'm trying to say here, is that sometimes you're going to have to break these rules. You're going to look at it and you're just going to go, it doesn't feel right. I need to just break these rules and make it happen. Because when you're creating an aquascape, you're creating art. And art provokes an emotion or some kind of feeling. And sometimes you can't do that without breaking the rules. And now these are just guidelines. These are just something to help you get going. These are not set in stone. The best example of it is our own rule, 1 inch per gallon. Now a lot of people tell newbies that come into the aquarium hobby that that is one of the general rules of thumb. Now hopefully you're one of those people that actually follows up with that. You just say, it's a general rule of thumb, but it depends on the fish you keep. It depends on how big your tank you have. It depends on the filtration you have. Is it a plant tank or isn't it a plant tank? Because all that takes an effect of how much fish you can keep in one tank. Same thing with the rules of thirds and the golden ratio. So that's one of the tips. Break the rules sometimes. Now the second factor, which I think is one of the most important factors in aquascaping when it applies to these rules. The rules of thirds and the golden ratio are based on photography, filmmaking, anything that's two-dimensional. When we aquascape, there's nothing two-dimensional about it. There's another dimension that we're working with, the third dimension. Not only do we have to worry about horizontal and vertical artistry, we have to worry about depth as well. And I think that's one of the most important things that when people talk about these rules and aquascaping is that they're not taking into account that there is a third dimension we're dealing with. So I'm telling you right now, you're going to have to learn techniques of depth. And I bet you anything you already know about them. You've seen them in other YouTube videos. And that's simply the creation of depth. You know when people set up the aquarium and they put the frosted film as their backing? They're doing that to create a sense of depth, a sense of open space. That is one of those techniques that I'm talking about, the third dimension. So when you're aquascaping, remember that you're not just creating or painting a picture. You're creating three-dimensional art. So when you're painting your picture of your aquascape, it's not about horizontal or vertical. It's also about back and forth. If you place a rock up front on your aquascape, you place another bigger rock on the back, it creates that sense of depth. When you create a path that starts wide from the beginning and then narrows down towards the back somewhere, you're creating depth. The easiest example is a planted tank. When you create one, I always tell you, stem plants in the back create a nice background for you. Mid-ground plants will stay in the middle, and your carpeting up front. This creates a sense of upwardness, the most basic aquascaping that you could do with a planted tank. I hope that makes sense for you. If you have any comments or questions, just leave down below and I'll answer them as quickly as possible. And remember, if you're new to this channel, you want more aqua goodness, please subscribe and hit that like button if you like this video. I'll talk to you guys later.